Picture this. Long before there were pharmacies with neat white bottles and child-proof caps, there were people walking through deserts, forests, and rocky hillsides, picking leaves, resins, roots, and seeds that could heal a wound, calm a fever, or even save a life. These weren't random plants. These were sacred, powerful, and mentioned again and again in the Bible, not just as symbols of faith but as literal medicine that ancient people relied on every single day. Today we're counting down 10 of these forgotten biblical plants, starting at number 10 and working our way down to the most powerful pick at number 1, and by the end of this video you're going to look at your spice rack in your garden completely differently. Number 10 is hyssop, a plant you've probably heard of in church but never really understood. Hyssop is a small, bushy herb with tiny blue or purple flowers, growing wild across the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and parts of Europe, especially on dry, rocky, sunny slopes. In the Bible, hyssop shows up during the Passover story, used to sprinkle blood on doorposts, and again during purification rituals. But hyssop wasn't just symbolic. Ancient healers used it as a natural remedy for coughs, sore throats, and respiratory problems, and modern science backs this up, because hyssop contains compounds that act as an expectorant, loosening mucus in the chest, plus antibacterial and antiviral properties, which is why some traditional medicine systems still brew hyssop tea for colds and flu today. A common misconception is that biblical hyssop is the exact same plant we call hyssop today, but many scholars believe the original might have actually been a marjoram or oregano relative, since true hyssop wasn't common in ancient Israel. Number 9 is myrrh. One of the most famous biblical plants thanks to the story of the 3 wise men bringing gifts to baby Jesus. Myrrh isn't a leaf or flower, it's a resin, a sticky sap that oozes out of the conifer tree when its bark is cut, hardening into golden brown droplets harvested by hand across ancient Arabia, Somalia, and Ethiopia. This tree thrives in hot, dry, rocky environments where almost nothing else survives, and that toughness might explain why its sap is so potent. Ancient Egyptians used myrrh in embalming for its antimicrobial properties, and it was burned as incense, used in perfumes, and applied to wounds as a natural antiseptic. Modern studies confirm real antibacterial and anti-inflammatory effects, and it's still found in some natural mouthwashes today for soothing gums and bad breath. People often assume myrrh was purely ceremonial, but it was actually one of the most valuable medicines of the ancient world, sometimes worth more than gold. Number 8 is frankincense. Often mentioned right alongside myrrh, and made through a very similar process. It's the resin from the boswellia tree, growing in the same harsh desert regions of the Arabian Peninsula and northeast Africa. Harvesters would slice the bark and let the sap slowly bleed out and harden over several weeks before collecting the golden tears. It was burned in temples constantly, not just for its beautiful smell but because ancient people believed the smoke had cleansing and healing power. Modern research supports part of this, since frankincense contains boswellic acids with documented anti-inflammatory effects, and some studies are exploring its role in managing arthritis. It was also used for skin problems, digestion, and respiratory ailments. A common myth is that it was just a fancy air freshener for the wealthy, but historical texts show it was genuinely used as medicine across Egypt, Rome, and the Middle East. Number 7 is spikenard, sometimes just called nard, tied to one of the most touching stories in the Bible, when Mary anointed Jesus' feet with an expensive jar of it. Spikenard comes from a flowering plant in the valerian family, growing high in the Himalayan mountains of India, Nepal, and China, which explains why it was so expensive by the time it reached Jerusalem along ancient trade routes. The oil is extracted from the plant's roots and stems, with a deep, earthy, musky scent very different from lighter floral oils. Ancient healers valued it for calming anxious nerves, easing insomnia, and soothing headaches, and modern aromatherapy still uses spikenard oil for exactly the same reasons, since it contains compounds thought to have a mild sedative effect on the nervous system. A common misconception is that spikenard was just a luxury perfume, but it was genuinely used as a calming medicinal oil, and its extreme cost in the Bible story wasn't about vanity, it reflected how far it had to travel and how medicinally prized it was. Number 6 is mandrake, a plant with a strange, almost eerie reputation in the ancient world. Mandrake grows low to the ground across the Mediterranean and Middle East, with broad leaves and a thick forked root that some people thought looked like a tiny human body, which is part of why it was wrapped in so much superstition. In the Bible, mandrakes appear in the story of Rachel and Leah, linked to fertility. Ancient physicians actually used mandrake root as a sedative and pain reliever before surgery, since it contains natural compounds with narcotic and numbing effects, making it one of the earliest forms of anesthesia in human history. That said, mandrake is genuinely risky, since the same compounds that made it useful as medicine can be toxic in the wrong dose, causing hallucinations, vomiting, or worse, so this is not a plant anyone should experiment with today. A common misconception is that mandrake's fertility reputation was purely superstitious, but some of its chemical properties do affect the nervous system in ways ancient people may have genuinely noticed, even without understanding why. Number 5 is wormwood, a bitter, silvery green herb that grows across Europe, Asia, and North Africa in dry fields and roadsides. It's mentioned in the Bible often as a symbol of bitterness and sorrow, but it had a very real medicinal side too. Ancient healers used wormwood to treat digestive problems and intestinal parasites, and this actually lines up with modern herbal medicine, since wormwood contains compounds that have historically been used in remedies to expel intestinal worms, which is literally how it got its name. It's also one of the key ingredients traditionally used in absinthe. A major precaution here is that wormwood contains a compound called thujone, which in high concentrations can be toxic to the nervous system, so while it had real medicinal uses in careful, controlled ancient preparations, it's not something to consume carelessly today. Number 4 is balm of Gilead, a plant so famous for its healing reputation that it actually gave us the phrase we still use today when we talk about something offering comfort or a cure. This resin came from a small tree grown specifically in the Gilead region east of the Jordan River, and it was considered one of the finest healing balms in the ancient Near East, valuable enough that it was a major export and trade item. It was used topically on wounds, skin conditions, and even reportedly for eye problems, and its resin had natural soothing and antiseptic qualities similar to other biblical resins like myrrh and frankincense. A common misconception is that balm of Gilead refers to one single, clearly identified plant species even today, but scholars still debate exactly which tree it came from, since the original groves in Gilead have long since disappeared. Number 3 is aloe. Though biblical aloe is a bit different from the aloe vera plant sitting on your windowsill today. In the Bible, aloe most likely refers to aloes wood, also called agarwood, a fragrant resin-infused wood from trees native to Southeast Asia that made its way along trade routes to the Middle East. It was used for embalming, alongside myrrh, and burned as a fragrant incense believed to have purifying properties. Interestingly, agarwood is still highly prized today, sometimes selling for enormous prices, and it's used in perfumery and in traditional medicine across parts of Asia for calming the mind and easing digestive discomfort. A common mix-up is assuming biblical aloe is the same succulent plant used for soothing sunburn today, but that's a case of one name covering two very different plants across history. Number 2 is cassia, a plant closely related to cinnamon, with a fragrant bark that was ground into powder and used in oils, perfumes, and even in the holy anointing oil described in the book of Exodus. Cassia trees grow in warm, humid regions of South Asia and were transported along ancient spice routes to reach Egypt and the Middle East. Beyond its pleasant scent, cassia was used to help with digestive issues and was believed to have warming, circulation-boosting properties, similar to how cinnamon is used in traditional medicine today. Modern research on cassia and its cinnamon relatives has actually looked into their effects on blood sugar regulation, giving some real backing to the old idea that this spice was good for the body, not just the nose. One important precaution is that cassia contains higher levels of a compound called Cumin compared to true cinnamon, and in large amounts over time this can affect liver health, so moderation matters. Number 1 Rue, a small, blue-green herb with a strong, pungent smell, mentioned in the Bible as something even meticulously tithed by religious leaders, showing just how valued it was in daily life. Rue grows easily in dry, sunny areas across the Mediterranean and Middle East, and ancient physicians used it as a treatment for digestive issues, as an insect repellent, and even as a remedy applied to the eyes and skin for various ailments. It was considered an almost all-purpose medicinal herb in the ancient world, prescribed for everything from headaches to intestinal complaints. However, rue deserves real respect and caution, because in excess it can cause skin irritation, especially in sunlight, and in larger internal doses it can be toxic, particularly for pregnant women, since it has historically been linked to complications in pregnancy. So while it earns the top spot for how widely and powerfully it was used across the ancient world, it's also a strong reminder that these biblical plants were genuine medicine, with real power and real risks, which is exactly why understanding them properly, rather than just romanticizing them, matters so much even today. And that wraps up our countdown of 10 forgotten biblical plants that once worked like an entire pharmacy growing wild across deserts and hillsides, proving that long before modern medicine, people were already discovering some remarkably real healing power hidden in the plants right around them.